Australia's population reached 22.7 million people at the end of June 2012. This was an increase of around 1.9 million people, or 9%, in the 5 years since June 2007. Most of this growth occurred in capital cities, which grew by almost 1.5 million people over the period. The population of Australia's capital cities grew by around 10%, with the remainder of the country growing by 7%. Perth was the fastest growing capital city, followed by Darwin and Brisbane. There was strong growth in the outer suburb areas, inner city areas, urban infill areas, and along the coast. Strong growth was seen on the fringes of the capital cities, especially on the outskirts of Greater Melbourne. Noticeable growth was also seen in the inner city areas, with the Perth City and Melbourne areas experiencing the largest increases in the country. The most prominent growth outside of capital cities occurred along the coast of Australia, particularly in Queensland. Upper Coomera Willow Vale on the Gold Coast had the largest increase, outside of Greater Brisbane. The population of some regions declined over the period, with most of these in well-established areas within Australia's capital cities. Mill Park South, on the northeastern outskirts of Greater Melbourne, had the largest decline in the country. When we take a look at the state and territories, we can see that Sydney's population growth accounted for almost 3/4 of New South Wales' growth over the period. Parkley-Kellyville Ridge was the largest and fastest growing region. Melbourne was the capital city which grew the most in Australia, by more than 400,000 people. It contains some of the most rapidly growing smaller areas in the country, including South Morang and Point Cook. The highest growth regions in Brisbane were Ipswich and Moreton Bay South, while elsewhere in the state, Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast grew rapidly. Looking at South Australia, Paraka and Munopara West Anglevale, in Adelaide's northern suburbs, were some of the highest growing areas in the state. Perth was the fastest growing capital city over the period. The fastest growing region in Western Australia was Forestdale, Harrisdale, Piara Waters in southern Perth. The fastest growing regions in Tasmania were Margate Snug and Brighton Pontville. Lyons in Darwin was the fastest growing region in the Northern Territory. The largest growth was seen in Rosebery, Bellarmac and Darwin City. Most of the growth in the Australian Capital Territory was in the northern regions. The region with the largest growth was Gungahlin. Today's release of regional population data also provides information on the age and sex profile of each area. This population pyramid not only shows that many more people live in the capital cities, but that this is particularly true for some age groups. For example, almost 3/4 of people aged between 25 to 29 years lived in the capital cities. This shows particular ages where people move to the capital cities for education, work, and other reasons. Today's release also includes maps showing the percentage of the population who were children in the 15 to 64 age group, the working age population, and the percentage of the population aged 65 years and over. The sex ratio of an area tells us how many men live in the area for every 100 women who live in the area. Australia's sex ratio at June 2012 was 99.1. This map shows how the numbers of men and women vary across the regions. The highest sex ratios were Western Australia Outback, Queensland Outback, and Northern Territory Outback, which were all areas with significant mining activity. The lowest sex ratios were in the inner suburbs of Melbourne and North Sydney and Hornsby. Thank you for watching. More information on this release and regional population estimates can be found on the ABS website.